I'm Alan from Infrared-sauna-repairs. In this series of videos, we're going to attempt to help you diagnose and repair some common faults in your infrared sauna unit. In today's video, we're back in the Luxo 4-person infrared sauna. We want to show you how to replace the wall controller and the power supply on the roof with one of our universal replacements. So to begin, it's always important to have the right tools ready to go to make sure the job is as efficient as possible. In this particular job, we're going to be disconnecting some cables that we need to reconnect later on. So that's why we've got some white tape or any kind of label and a permanent marker. Also our multimeter in case we need to do any testing, pliers, terminal driver, Phillips 1, Phillips 2, utility knife, and a battery driver. This is the original Luxo wall controller that came with the unit. Today we're going to be replacing it for one of our landscape universal controllers. So let's unpack the box and make sure we've got everything we need. We have the power supply, which lives on the roof, including the AC cable. We have the master controller, which you can tell is this one because of the thermostat and the aerial. The interconnecting cable, which is to link up the master controller and the power supply. And a secondary controller, including the link cable between the secondary controller and the master controller, if applicable. Now, before beginning any work, it is important to make sure the power is switched off and the unit is unplugged. And remember, if you're not a professional, do not attempt to do this. The next step is to locate the power supply. In this particular unit, it's in the ceiling in the back corner. Otherwise, you can simply trace the power cable and find out where that enters into the unit, and it will be somewhere in that vicinity. So we're going to take either our Phillips head driver or the Phillips head screwdriver and remove the perimeter screws that are holding the top of the sauna down. So we're just going to remove the lid and place it to the side. So now that we've got the power supply exposed, we need to take off the lid by just removing the 4 screws, which I've already done, and placing that again to the side. So now you're going to want to get your tape and marker and start identifying the circuits, including the outgoing heater circuits, the outgoing switched lighting circuits, and the outgoing hardwired 12-volt circuits. The first one we're looking at are the heater circuits. So remove this terminal block and start disconnecting the cables that go out to those heaters. The next thing we're going to want to identify is the 12-volt DC switched lighting circuit. So we can trace the cable back from the globe all the way to our power supply. The lights on the front of this unit have a constant 12-volt supply going to them, which is switched next to the lights. This is hardwired directly to the switching transformer. So again, we trace the cables back from their location to this point and label them. The way this particular controller was set up, a lot of the cables are individual, going back from the relay and the power supply down to the inside wall controller. The new one we're installing has a ribbon cable, so we can do away with a lot of these additional cables. Now that the power supply has been completely disconnected, we can remove it from the ceiling. We also have the speakers on the left and the right that we want to disconnect and label. So they come from the audio system that was previously mounted up in the top corner. We're now removing the internal wall controller. Because we've disconnected the cables from the top, they should just pull through the hole. The next thing we want to do is remove the controller from the bracket that holds it onto the wall and replace it with the master controller for the replacement unit. We do this by turning it over and removing the 4 screws that pin it into place. And setting that to the side. Now, because we're not fastening this back to a wall and we're actually lodging it forward into that bracket, we're going to pop the sticker onto the front of this controller straight away. Now, because this unit is a little bit wider than the last one, I'm going to have to make a couple of adjustments just to get that to sit in there properly. This might not be always the case, but you might just have to work that out as you're going along. Now that I've made the modifications to the bracket, it's time to put the new controller in. So I'm going to start by turning it upside down, facing it forward into the space of the old one, and fastening it with the same screws that we used on the old controller. Now that that's fastened into place, it's time to put it back on the wall. Before we fasten the wall controller back to the wall, we want to make sure the ribbon cable is connected that goes up to the power supply. Now that we've got the wall controller ready to go back on, we just simply need to pass the cables back through the original hole. Now that all the cables are through, we simply screw this back into position where the old one was. Now it's time to grab the power supply and jump back up top. Now we've got the new power supply to place into position, making sure the holes are facing towards the bulk of your cables. Now we need to take the top off and start attaching the cables. Now when you remove the lid, remember to keep the electrical diagram close to you so you can identify all the connection points. So now that we've got the lid off, we want to point out a few of the items in here. These 2 points are the speaker connections. There's a little speaker symbol and the positive and the negative. Over here we've got the lamp and the light. These are both switched by the light switch on the wall controller. These points here are if you have the optional LED red, green, blue lights in the ceiling, and these are the switched heater circuits. The first thing we want to do is bring the heater circuits inside and connect them up. So now we're going to want to connect up the heater circuits. In this case, the neutral is the blue cable and the brown is a line. The next aspect we want to look at will be the lighting, and this is the switch lighting circuit, so the interior reading lamp. Both of these terminals here, positive and negative, are switched by the same switch on the wall controller inside. If the 12-volt lamp inside your sauna has a wattage greater than 10, you will need to replace it for a lower wattage LED globe, just so that the switching can support it. So taking the cables that we labeled before with the inside lamp, we want to strip the ends, twist them, fold them over. So now that we've got the inside lamp cable. We want to feed that in through one of the other holes and insert that into one of the switched terminals. Now, as we noted at the beginning, the front lights on this unit are switched at the front. So we just need to apply 12 volts to this cable at all times. So to do that, we'll connect it directly to the switching transformer. Feeding that through with the other light. We'll connect these directly to the DC outside of this transformer. The next thing we want to connect up is the speakers. So we've got the left and the right here. So again, we're going to bring them through the other hole and connect them to these two terminals here. Now that everything is connected in our power supply, we've simply got to place the aerial somewhere on top of the roof, locate the thermostat inside the old thermostat hole. In the case of the existing thermostat, this one was attached to a screw on the roof. So I'm simply going to push this steel nipple through until I can see that it's inside the unit and wrap it around this screw a few times just to make sure it stays in position. And connect up the two ribbon cables. Now we simply connect the ribbon cable by making sure the hole and the latch line up. Push that in and it's done. So before we put the lid back on, make sure you grab the screws that were holding the old power supply down and put them in. So the box is screwed to the top. Put the lid back on and put those screws in. Now before we put the lid back on the sauna, it's important that we plug it in, turn the power back on and make sure it's working. So now we've plugged the sauna back in and the power's on. Come inside the unit, we can see a little indicator light there showing us we have power at the controller. Turn the sauna on at the on button and there you've got a temperature and a time display. Now that we know the sauna's working, you can put the cover back on the top, screw it all back together and make sure it's ready to go. To recap today's video, we've replaced the power supply and the wall controller. This has been done using one of our common universal power supplies, available in either portrait or landscape depending on how your controller is mounted. That's it for this video. I hope you found the information useful. If you have any specific queries or questions or other topics you'd like us to discuss, please reach out in the link below. I also stock a full range of parts described in this series. They're available express posted Australia-wide on our website infrared-sauna-repairs.com.au.